Welcome back to another episode of the Magpie Witch Podcast. I am your host, Ashley, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a book review on New World Witchery by Cory Hutcheson, and then we're going to be comparing it to his newer book, North American Folk Magic. But first, two things. One, we aren't on camera because, well, it's really hot outside in Tennessee, and I have to have the AC off. So if you can imagine, to stay cool, I probably don't have much on. Also, that does mean that this podcast is not going to be terribly too long because it's warming up as the podcast progresses. So there's that. Second, they're doing some sort of landscaping or something. They might be spreading gravel very close by to where I am right now. So you might hear some stuff, and I can't control that. So, anyhoozle, let's get on with it. So, the book that I'm reviewing, New World Witchery by Cory Hutcheson. I was incredibly excited to find this book when I was first starting my path down Appalachian folkcraft. I do have ancestry that is mixed with all of the huge myriad of cultures and ethnicities that are, we all have come to know that make up the giant melting pot that is Appalachia and that is Appalachian folkcraft. So this book was incredibly exciting for me to grab. Just some basics first. At the time of me buying it, it was about $28, so it's a little bit more on the pricey side, but I would say that it's incredibly worth it. The book itself is, let's see here, I want to say about 450 pages, and that's with the extensive index, as well as it's about 15-page long bibliography. So let's get into the meat of it. So the reason why I like this book so much is because it's almost like it's also kind of a double-edged sword, too, and I'll get to why that is. But it's a grab bag of a ton of different practices that spans over as much of I guess, the cultural practices that he possibly could put into a book without it being 1,000 pages long. Because, again, if you know anything about Appalachian folkcraft, there's so many cultures intertwined and religious practices and magical practices. Like, to even try to make a book, to even approach making a single book on it is a huge undertaking. And so I can, this book, while it's amazing and it is a huge grab bag, like I said, it's a double-edged sword because you are taking so many different magical practices from different cultures that some detail can be lost. And I will say he does a really good job of staying detailed. He does cover herbs, he covers different jar spells, he covers protection spells, he covers death work, necromancy, spirit work, all sorts of stuff in here. But because you do have to cover that many cultures and you have to give each one, space, you do tend to lose a little bit of detail, and I don't think I'll ding the book for that because, again, it just covers so much. So, like I said, it's about 450 pages. Each section is broken up into different rites, so think of that as like units, and then under those rites there's chapters, and then so under each of these rites, that's how he has organized kind of, I'm going to call this a grimoire because this is basically, that's basically what it is. It's like if you took a person, which, essentially that's what Cory did here, toured all of Appalachian folkcraft, or as much as you possibly could, and then, wrote what you learned on it, and wrote the spells that you would like to take note of. This is basically that. So I would call this definitely a grimoire of sorts. I love this grimoire. It's so cool. He covers things, like I said, from like jar spells, protection spells, working with the dead. I'm just looking at the table of contents right here just to name some more things. He goes through different like divination styles. He talks about working with bones and different types of herbs, making dolls, working the root, stuff like that. So that's what I really like about it, just as far as like the superficial stuff. He also includes a crap ton of different exercises and practical work that he goes ahead and calls dirt under the nails, which I kind of dig, because it's like you're getting your hands dirty, right? A big thing in, gosh, that, I'm so sorry. I think that, tangent, I don't know what it's called, but it's like those really heavy duty, like giant construction vehicle thingies. God, it's my husband. He's in construction. He's gonna laugh at me if he hears this, because I don't know the freaking name, but it has a really heavy roller on the front, and I think they're trying to flatten gravel. Like you give a shit. But yeah, that's the sound in the background right now. I'm so sorry. But yes, back to the dirt under the nails part. You know, Appalachian folkcraft, I don't know too much about other types of folkcraft. I know some, but Appalachian folkcraft specifically is disgusting at times. You know, he includes things in here for like making like a witch's jar, which is basically just like blood, urine, broken glass, sand, spicy things, vinegar, you know, anything disgusting you can put in there to try to ward off bad shit, basically. Hopefully that gives you a good indication that, yeah, Appalachian folkcraft is not necessarily for the faint of heart, and I love it so much because of that. But yeah, so he calls those different workings dirt under the nails. He also has more mundane exercises, which I do really enjoy. Not a lot of magical books or texts that you find on the shelves these days will include the more mundane work, and he actually calls it the work, and he includes that in every chapter. Just like, for example, let's see here, Signs and Omens in chapter 7. The working for that is basically going out in nature and trying to connect and find any sort of signs and symbology that kind of sings to your soul, basically. And, you know, maybe trying to communicate with different entities and seeing if they give you those symbols and signs out in nature. Yeah, working with plants, that's another one, doing the work. They all have that like slight tinge of magical connection, but it's just a little bit more of like your everyday practical magic is basically what I'm saying. So yeah, you have dirt under nails, you have the work, and then you have singing bones. And I love this for many reasons why he calls it singing bones. But singing bones is him talking about a specific person, figure that had some sort of significance in that particular magical working or thought, I guess. Religious path, yes. So yeah, and he'll reference different like significant cultural people, basically cultural figures, which I love as well. I kind of hinted at this beforehand. The limitations to this book, and I am staying vague specifically just because I don't want y'all to have spoilers, but also just because it is such a giant book. It covers, I mean, shoot, I could just, yeah, it just covers so much. This is, okay, here's pretty epic limitation. If you're trying to find, say you're a little bit newer to Appalachian folkcraft, and I will say I'm definitely not a master at all. I'm not claiming to be a master at all. I have so much more learning to do. But if you are definitely just getting into it, this book could be a little bit challenging because it doesn't, especially in the table of contents, if you are trying to use this as like a quick grab book, you know, grimoire that's just chilling next to your, you know, wherever you do your magical workings, and you just want to treat it as that book that you just reference real fast, right? Maybe there's a specific type of practice that you're trying to take inspiration from or study for that particular working that you're trying to do. It's not really, like, labeled too nicely. And I mean in that, like, for example, salting her skin, the witch in flight. Well, maybe that's not a really good one, because you can, yeah, maybe not that one. That's talking about altered state of consciousness. But, let's see, bloody sod and silver spade, treasure hunting and magic. Like, off the top of, just that title, I can't really tell exactly what that's going for. I could break it apart and be like, well, it's probably for manifestation. It's probably, I don't know unless I read the chapter, right? So yeah, it can be a little bit more challenging if you don't know where everything came from. Again, I certainly don't know where everything came from, but I'm trying. So yeah, so this book, if you were super new, it might be worth to grab just so you can learn just the little bit of tidbits of history that he does include in here. But I would highly recommend actually reading the second book he came out with, North American Folk Magic. Ironically, that came out later, but I would recommend you read that first. And I'll get to that in just a second. Good God. Can they be any freaking louder out there? I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna let them drive past. Sweet Jesus. I don't know what that sounds like on audio. We'll find out. Yes, so, yes, if you are just starting out, this would be a little bit of a challenge, but there is definitely a crap ton of just really good information, and even if you weren't wanting to get into Appalachian folkcraft and you just wanted a book that, like, told you all of the really big things. Like, if someone was like, okay, sit down and give me the most concise summary of all of Appalachian magical practices that you can possibly think of, and make sure that they all get the time that they deserve. That's really hard. Like I said earlier. So, yeah, he did a really good job with this book. Now, how to compare it to his newer book... It is much less a grimoire type style. There is workings in here, and I am going to be honest, I'm still reading this one. I'm still in the process of reading it, and that's why I'm not saying I'm reviewing this one, but I am comparing it. So, this one actually breaks up the book into much fewer sections, because it's actually broken up into the different regions of Appalachia, as well as honestly just North America in general. I'm sorry. This one is, I would say, both more general than his first book, because it does cover all of North America rather than just mostly Appalachian stuff. Mostly. It covers from the West Coast all over to the East Coast. So it is much more general. But if you were wanting to get into more folkcraft type practices rather than, high magic type stuff, this would be a really good book, because you can find where you're currently living, or maybe where your ancestors came from that you know of. Like, for example, say I was living in the Midwest or the Midlands, right? Say I was from the Ozarks, which I do have family that live in the Ozarks, actually. Yeah, my grandparents. Chapter 5, or Section 5, page 185, talks about the Midlands, and it goes into this whole, like, much deeper context and history of the magic that goes through the Midlands and through that region, as well as just other regions like the Plains West, you got the left coast, the deep south, stuff like that. So it goes into more depth, I feel, of each region's specific magical practice. But where it struggles is the things that he's talking about are not necessarily just in his voice. And I mean that in that for each section is a story from a specific person that is from that region. I think, one, that's absolutely awesome to get a person that is from that region, that's from that particular practice, or a subset of that practice, to actually talk in their own personal experiences. I think that's great. But on the flip side of that, and again, like I said before with the other book, it's extremely difficult to try to encompass not only just Appalachian folkcraft, like his other book, but in this book, all of folkcraft in North America. That's even a bigger challenge. So, I can see that he did the best that he could by including personal stories. I would have liked to maybe see a couple more personal stories for each region, but at the same time, this book is just as long, if not ever so slightly longer, than the other book. Yeah, it's roughly just as long than the first book. So, he did the best that he could, and I think that he did okay with what he did. Like, it is what it is. This book, I would say, is definitely much more of a starter book if you're wanting to get into folkcraft in general. And like I said before, read this one. If you're going to buy his books, if this intrigues you, North American Folk Magic, read that book first, because it gives you much more historical context per region. And then grab New World Witchery, which is his first book. What's funny? I'm actually looking back at the cover of New World Witchery, and it says a trove of North American folk magic, and a lot of what he does include is just really specifically Appalachian stuff. Yeah, that's funny. And usual. Yeah, so this was going to be a really short podcast. I do apologize. But you got the huge Fae podcast yesterday. So if you want to learn about running with the Fae and who they are and whatnot, go watch my other podcast. But yeah, this was going to be a short one. Again, it's getting warm in here as we speak, and I don't want to cook. So there's that. So yes, New World Witchery, just under $30. If you are just wanting to get into folkcraft, or if you would you've been into folkcraft and you would like more of a grimoire style book rather than kind of a text that you just read, when you're trying to learn and research, go for his first book. If you are newer to folk magic in general and you just are trying to dip your toe in the water, and maybe you're trying to be guided by your ancestors, or maybe where you live currently, or whatever, you're trying to get to know it a little bit more, go for a second book. So, alright, I'm going to go ahead and call that next Tuesday for that podcast. What do I want to do? I might talk about meditation. And I might, here's a little tidbit on the meditation for you. And this actually, I might actually talk about that, yeah. Meditation is not exactly the way that everybody touts it is on your witchcraft groups on social media. It does not have to be this terrifying practice that, spans hours per day, and you gotta focus on one thing and one thing only, and no, God's no. No. So we're going to do a podcast on meditation on Tuesday. And I might actually talk about soul journeys as well. Yeah. Meditation, I'll cover soul journeys, and then what am I thinking? Out-of-body experiences. No. Altered state of consciousnesses, that's part of it. What is where your consciousness, your soul leaves your body for a moment. I call them soul journeys. Astral projection. We might go into that a little bit. Dreams, stuff like that. Tuesday is going to be a good podcast. Okay. So, alright. I hope that gave you a little bit of an idea of his books. Again, it's very vague because Appalachian and much more broadly folk magic, putting that all into one book is a challenge. So go you, Cory Hutcheson. I think you did a really freaking good job. Go check out his books. If you have not watched or listened to my other podcast, you should go check those out, because I'm trying to teach you things on this channel that not necessarily everybody wants to talk about. Or I talk about it in a way that no one else wants to talk about it. So, I talk about portals, following your intuition. I talked about the Fae yesterday. Yeah. So go check that out. Please like this episode. Please subscribe so you can hear more chaotic witchy crap. And I will see you on Tuesday. Stay safe out there. Take your meds. Drink your water. And go do something fun this weekend. Take care of yourselves. All right. Bye.